When I first met Daniel, I thought he was everything I'd ever wanted in a man. He had that easy smile, the kind that made you feel safe, like the world couldn't touch you when he was near. We met at a small coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. I remember the way his hair was slightly wet from the rain and how he apologized for dripping water on the floor. I laughed and told him it was fine, and somehow that simple moment turned into a conversation that lasted 3 hours. He made me feel seen in a way no one ever had before. When he asked me out again, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes before my mind could catch up with my heart. Our love moved fast. Within a year, we were living together, and 6 months after that, we got married. It felt like a fairy tale. We had a small ceremony with just close family and friends. I remember looking at him during our vows, thinking how lucky I was that this man chose me. What I didn't know was that I hadn't just married Daniel. I had also married his mother, Evelyn. From the very beginning, Evelyn made sure I knew that she was part of the package. She wasn't cruel, not at first. She was polite, overly so, with that kind of kindness that feels rehearsed. She would smile and tell me how happy she was that her son had found someone like me, but there was always a certain tone behind her words, like she was testing me, waiting for me to make a mistake. After the wedding, she started calling every day. At first, Daniel thought it was sweet. He said, "She just wants to check in." But soon, those calls became little critiques. She would ask what Daniel had eaten, how the house looked, how our finances were. I didn't mind a bit of involvement. After all, she was his mother. But it didn't take long before it felt suffocating. She'd give me unsolicited advice about everything from how I folded towels to how I should dress when Daniel came home. And every time I tried to set a boundary, she'd act hurt. "Oh, honey," she'd say, "I'm just trying to help. Don't take it the wrong way." Daniel didn't see it. To him, she was just being caring. He grew up with her being controlling, but he called it love. Whenever I brought it up, he'd sigh and say, "Claire, that's just how mom is. You have to understand her heart." But I did understand. I understood that her heart didn't have room for anyone who might come between her and her son. It started small. Evelyn would drop by unannounced. Sometimes she'd bring food. Sometimes she'd just happen to be in the neighborhood. One time she came over and started reorganizing our kitchen. When I told her I preferred things the way they were, she smiled and said, "Oh, sweetheart, I'm just helping you get more efficient. You'll thank me later." I stood there watching her rearrange the life I was trying to build, feeling smaller and smaller by the minute. Over time, Daniel began to echo her words. If I forgot to do something, he'd say, "Mom never let that go undone." If I made a decision, he'd question it because Mom thinks it should be done differently. Slowly, his voice stopped being his own. It became hers. I didn't even realize it at first. I just kept trying harder to please them both, thinking if I loved enough, if I was kind enough, if I tried enough, I could make it work. But love can't survive in a house of shadows. The first real fight we had was about a birthday dinner. I'd spent the whole day cooking his favorite meal. I wanted the night to be special. I set the table, lit candles, put on his favorite song. Just as I was finishing, his phone rang. It was his mother. She wanted him to come over because she'd made him a special birthday dinner. I thought he'd say no. I thought he'd tell her he already had plans with his wife. But he didn't. He looked at me, hesitated, and said, "Maybe we can go for a bit. She'll be disappointed if I don't." That night, we ate dinner at Evelyn's house instead of our own. My food went cold on the table while I smiled through tears in her living room, pretending I didn't feel invisible. It became a pattern. Every milestone, every private moment, somehow she found a way to be part of it. When I tried to talk to Daniel, he got defensive. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he'd say. "She's my mom, Claire. You need to respect that." Respect. That word started to sound like a cage. I respected her so much that I stopped respecting myself. Months passed and things got worse. Evelyn began to criticize me openly. She'd comment on my cooking, my clothes, the way I spoke. One night during dinner at her house, she said in front of everyone, "Daniel, you've lost weight. Claire must not be feeding you enough." Everyone laughed, even Daniel. I smiled too, but inside I broke a little more. When we got home, I tried to explain how that made me feel, but he just shrugged. "She didn't mean it that way. You're too sensitive." That's what he always said. Too sensitive, too emotional, too much. I started believing him. I started thinking maybe something was wrong with me. The day things really started to unravel was the day I found the messages. Daniel had left his phone on the counter, and I saw his mother's name pop up. I didn't mean to read them, but when I saw the words, I couldn't stop. She was telling him that I was lazy, that I didn't take care of him the way a wife should, that she was worried I might be after his money. My hands trembled as I read it. What hurt even more was his response. "Yeah, sometimes I wonder about that too." That's when I realized it wasn't just her. He believed her. That night, I confronted him. I told him I saw the messages. He looked ashamed for a second, then angry. "You went through my phone?" he said. "That's not okay, Claire. That's a violation." I couldn't believe it. He was more upset about me reading the truth than about the lies she told. I shouted, I cried, I begged him to see what was happening. But he just stood there, silent. And when he finally spoke, all he said was, "You need to stop trying to turn me against my mother." After that, something in me changed. I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped explaining myself. I started going quiet. The house that used to be full of laughter turned cold. We lived together, but we weren't together anymore. He spent more time with her than with me. Some nights he never came home, saying he stayed late to help her with something. I stopped asking questions because I already knew the answers.
It's crazy how fast a house can go from feeling like home to feeling like a cage. I used to love our place. The little kitchen where we'd dance around making pancakes on Sundays. The couch that had that one spring poking out we always joked about. But after a while, it all started to feel heavy. Like the walls could hear the fights and were sick of them too. Daniel had become a stranger who just happened to have the same face as the man I fell in love with. The only time he really talked to me was when he was defending his mom. Everything else was just small talk. Work, bills, the weather. It was like living with a roommate I used to love. One morning, I woke up and saw Evelyn's car in our driveway. It was barely 7 a.m. I opened the door, and there she was, holding grocery bags. "Daniel said you've been tired lately," she said, walking right in. "So I thought I'd come help around the house." I wanted to scream, but instead I forced a smile and said, "You really didn't have to." She just laughed, that high-pitched fake laugh of hers, and said, "Oh, honey, if I waited for you to ask, this place would fall apart." Daniel came out of the bedroom half asleep and grinned like a little boy. "Mom, you didn't have to do that." She touched his cheek and said, "You'll always be my baby. I'll do whatever I can for you." I just stood there, invisible. That was the moment I realized I wasn't his wife anymore. I was just another woman living in his mother's world. Evelyn had this way of making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Every time I tried to talk to Daniel about it, he acted like I was jealous or ungrateful. I remember one night I told him, "I need you to choose our marriage first. Not your mom, not her feelings, ours." He just looked at me and said, "She's my family, Claire. You're supposed to be part of that." I wanted to laugh, but it hurt too much, because I was trying. I'd been trying since day one. Things got worse around Christmas. We had agreed to spend it at home, just us, because it was our first Christmas as a married couple. I spent weeks decorating, cooking, and buying him gifts that I knew would make him smile. But on Christmas Eve, guess who called crying? Evelyn. She said she didn't feel well and didn't want to be alone. Daniel didn't even look at me before saying, "We should go, it's Mom." And just like that, our plans were gone. I spent Christmas Day sitting on her couch, watching her unwrap the gifts I bought her son. She even made a comment like, "I see you tried to cook, Claire. Don't worry, you'll learn eventually." Daniel just laughed and told her, "Yeah, she's getting there." My heart dropped. That was the moment I realized he wasn't coming back to me. After that, I started pulling away. I didn't fight anymore. I didn't explain. I just existed. I'd get up, go to work, come home, make dinner, and go to bed. We barely spoke. Evelyn still called every day, and I could hear him on the phone laughing with her like nothing was wrong. Sometimes I'd walk in and he'd lower his voice, which told me everything I needed to know. He was keeping secrets. Not the kind you keep to protect someone, but the kind that rot love from the inside out. One night, after another silent dinner, I finally said it. "Daniel, are you happy?" He looked up from his phone and said, "What kind of question is that?" I said, "A real one, because I'm not." He didn't answer for a while. Then he said, "You've changed." And I said, "Yeah, because I'm tired." He just shook his head, muttering something about how I was impossible to please. That was his favorite line lately. I didn't even cry that night. I was too numb for tears. A week later, Evelyn showed up again. No warning, as usual. She said she wanted to help me fix things with Daniel. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You two are struggling because you don't understand how to take care of him properly. Men need to be nurtured, dear." I wanted to scream, but instead I forced a smile and said, "I think we'll figure it out on our own." She smiled that condescending smile and said, "Well, I'm not sure you can, but bless your heart for trying." I went upstairs, shut the door, and cried into my pillow. Daniel came home that night, and when I told him what she said, he defended her again. "She's just trying to help." That phrase was poison. Every time he said it, I could feel another piece of me dying. Then came the final straw. It was our anniversary. I had booked a weekend getaway, just us, by the lake. I told him weeks in advance, and he said it sounded great. The day before we were supposed to leave, Evelyn called. Her car had broken down, and she needed Daniel to help her get it fixed. I told him there were plenty of repair shops and tow trucks, but he said, "She's my mom, Claire. I can't just leave her stranded." So he went. I waited for him to come back that night. He didn't. The next morning I got a text. "Mom asked me to stay the night. I'll see you tomorrow." That was the moment something in me snapped. I didn't even reply. I just sat there staring at the message until I felt nothing. When he came back the next day, I told him I was done. He laughed like he didn't believe me. He said, "You're being dramatic. You always say that." But I wasn't saying it to make a point. I meant it. I told him I couldn't live in a marriage where there was no space for me. That his mother had manipulated him so much he couldn't even tell where she ended and he began. He said I was being cruel, and I said, "Maybe, but at least I'm honest." Then I packed a bag, walked out, and didn't look back. The silence that followed was strange. At first, I thought I'd feel free. Instead, it felt like grief. I missed the version of him I married, the man who made coffee with too much sugar, who held my hand during storms, who used to whisper that we'd grow old together. That man was gone. His mother had buried him under her control, and I couldn't dig him out anymore. A few weeks later, I got divorce papers. He didn't even call. Just sent them through the lawyer. No apology, no explanation. I signed them without crying. The tears had already dried up long before that. I moved into a small apartment downtown. It was quiet, lonely, but peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I started doing little things for myself again. Cooking what I liked, staying up late watching movies, buying flowers just because I wanted to. Slowly, I started to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, before I became the enemy of a mother who couldn't let go. One night, about 6 months later, My phone rang. It was Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was soft, broken in a way I'd never heard before. He said, "Mom's been hard lately. I think I see what you were talking about. I think I finally get it." I didn't say anything for a while. I just listened to him breathe on the other end, sounding lost. Then I said, "Daniel, you need to figure out where your life starts and hers ends. Otherwise, you'll never be free." He was quiet for a long time, then said, "I think it's too late for that." And I said, "No, it's just too late for us." After that call, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and just breathed. The night air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. I thought about all the things I'd lost and all the things I was slowly gaining back. My peace, my voice, myself. Time went on and I started to settle into my new life. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it was mine. I got a small job at a bookstore downtown, the kind of place that always smells like coffee and old pages. I liked it there. People came in with stories of their own, and for a few hours a day, I could forget mine. I rented a tiny apartment above a bakery, and every morning the smell of fresh bread drifted through my window. It was the first time in years I woke up without that heavy feeling in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to walk on eggshells in my own home. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what Daniel was doing. Not because I wanted him back, but because part of me still cared. You don't just erase someone you once planned your future with. I'd think about him on Sundays, wondering if he was still spending the whole day at his mom's house. I wondered if she still called him every morning, or if maybe he'd finally started seeing what I'd seen all along. But I never called him. I'd learned that silence can be its own kind of healing. A few months later, I ran into one of his friends, Mark, at the grocery store. We chatted for a bit, the usual small talk. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said, Daniel's not doing too great. He's been spending all his time with his mom again. It's like he doesn't even know who he is without her." I nodded, but didn't say anything. Deep down, I wasn't surprised. That was always the problem. Evelyn didn't just want to be part of his life. She wanted to be his life. And he let her. After that, I stopped wondering about him. I stopped checking his social media. I deleted our old photos. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to carry that version of myself anymore. The woman in those pictures looked happy, but I knew now that she was just trying to survive. One afternoon, I was closing up the bookstore when I saw an older woman standing outside, crying quietly. She looked lost, so I went out and asked if she was okay. She said her son hadn't called her in months, and she didn't know what she'd done wrong. I listened as she talked about how close they used to be, how now she felt like a stranger in his life. And as she spoke, I felt this weird mix of sympathy and sadness. Not for her exactly, but for how complicated love between mothers and sons can get when it isn't balanced. I told her, sometimes love becomes control, even when it's not meant to. She looked at me and said, "I just miss him." And I thought, I know that feeling too. When I got home that night, I thought about Evelyn. I thought about how she probably saw me as the woman who stole her son. But the truth is, I never wanted to steal him. I just wanted to build a life with him. She never realized that we could have both had a place in his heart. But instead of sharing, she chose to compete. And in the end, we both lost. A year after the divorce, I got a message from Daniel. It was short. He said, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I see it all now." I didn't reply right away. I sat with it for a while. Then finally I wrote back, "I hope you're finding your peace, Daniel." He responded, "Trying to." That was the last time we ever spoke. Not long after that, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Evelyn had fallen sick. I didn't feel joy or anger, just a quiet kind of pity. I wondered if, in those moments of weakness, she thought about what her control had cost her. Maybe she finally realized that love built on manipulation isn't love at all. Or maybe she didn't. Some people never see the damage they cause. Either way, I wished her peace too, because carrying hate around only chains you to the past. My life kept moving forward. I started going on walks in the park every evening just to clear my mind. One day I met someone. His name was Tyler. He wasn't like Daniel. He didn't need to be constantly reassured, didn't compare me to anyone, just listened. We met a few times for coffee, talked about books and life, and slowly I felt that small spark of something I thought I'd lost. Hope. I didn't rush it. I wasn't ready for another relationship yet, but I liked that for the first time I was meeting someone without carrying the weight of who I used to be. Tyler and I became friends. He'd sometimes joke saying, "You've got this quiet strength about you, like you've walked through fire and came out still standing." And I'd laugh because he wasn't wrong. I had been through fire, and I had come out, maybe a little scarred, but stronger than I'd ever been. One evening, we were sitting on a bench watching the sunset when he said, "You ever been married?" I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, once." He asked if it ended badly, and I said, "It ended the way it needed to." That was all. He didn't push, didn't ask for details, just nodded. That's when I realized how healing it felt to be with someone who didn't demand explanations for my past. As months went by, I started writing again. I'd always loved journaling, but I'd stopped during my marriage because I felt like I didn't have a voice anymore. Now I wrote about everything: the pain, the lessons, the healing. One night I wrote something that stuck with me. You can't heal in the same place that broke you. I think that's what my marriage taught me most. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's finally choosing yourself. A few months later, Daniel's name popped up again. This time it was an email. He said his mom had passed away. I read it twice before I could process it. He wrote, "I thought you should know. I don't expect anything from you, but I wanted to tell you." I sat there for a long time, thinking about everything. The fights, the tears, the words I couldn't take back. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything left to say. Some chapters don't need closure. They just need peace. Later that week, I lit a candle and whispered a small prayer for both of them. For Daniel to find his freedom, for Evelyn to find forgiveness, and for myself to finally let go of the guilt I had carried for so long. Because for years, I'd blamed myself. I thought if I'd been more patient, more understanding, maybe things would have been different. But now I knew better. You can't fix a relationship that has 3 people in it when only 2 are supposed to be there. As time went on, Tyler became a bigger part of my life. We weren't in love yet. Not exactly, but there was comfort there. The kind that doesn't demand or control, just exists. One day, while we were walking by the lake, he said, "You've got this peaceful look when you talk about the past. Most people hold anger." And I said, "I did for a long time, but anger's heavy. Peace feels lighter." He smiled and said, "Then don't ever let anyone take that peace from you again." I promised him I wouldn't. There are still days when the memories sneak up on me, like when I hear a certain song or smell a dish that reminds me of our old kitchen. But now, instead of feeling pain, I just feel gratitude. Because those experiences shaped me. They taught me what real love looks like and what it doesn't.
Life has a funny way of giving you back everything you thought you lost, just in different shapes. I used to think love meant holding on, fighting through everything no matter how hard it got. But I learned that sometimes love is about letting go, about knowing when something isn't growing anymore, when it's only hurting you. I'd spent so long trying to make Daniel see me, trying to make him hear me over his mother's voice, that I forgot my own worth. It took losing him to remember it.
A year after his mom passed, I got a letter from Daniel. A real handwritten letter, not a text or an email. I opened it carefully, not sure what to expect. His handwriting looked the same, messy but familiar. The letter wasn't long, but it was honest. He said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand that I wasn't strong enough to stand up to her. I let her control everything. I lost you because I didn't know how to be my own man, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer. I didn't need to respond. I already understood. Some regrets are lessons in disguise. I didn't hate him anymore. I think that surprised me. I thought I'd hold on to that anger forever, but it just faded. He was a broken man raised by a woman who couldn't let him grow. That kind of damage doesn't heal easily. And even though he hurt me, I didn't want him to suffer. I just wanted him to find peace, the way I had started to find mine. Tyler and I eventually started dating. Slowly, carefully. He was patient with me in ways I didn't even know I needed. He never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. He didn't compare me to anyone, didn't question my choices. He once told me, "I don't need perfect, I just need real." And that stuck with me. With him, love didn't feel like walking on glass. It felt like breathing again. A few months into our relationship, I told him everything, the whole story from start to finish. I expected him to look at me differently, maybe even pity me. But he didn't. He just said, "You must have loved him a lot." I said, "I did." He nodded and said, "Then you did what you could. You can walk away knowing that." And he was right. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of how long I'd stayed. I realized staying wasn't weakness. It was hope. I just had to learn when hope turns into self-destruction. One Sunday morning, I went out to the farmer's market downtown. The air was warm, full of laughter and music. I saw families walking together, couples holding hands, kids running around. And for the first time, I didn't feel that ache of envy. I felt content. I was standing there, sipping coffee, when I saw Daniel across the street. He looked older, thinner, but calm. Our eyes met for a second. He smiled, a small, tired smile, and I smiled back. No bitterness, no resentment, just 2 people who used to share a life, acknowledging that we had both survived it. He didn't come over, and I didn't expect him to. That brief moment was enough. It felt like closure, silent but complete. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. That night, I told Tyler about it. He asked if it was hard seeing Daniel again. I said, no, it was peaceful. And it really was.
Over time, I realized something important. People talk a lot about toxic relationships, about heartbreak, about betrayal, but they don't talk enough about recovery, about the quiet rebuilding that comes after. Healing isn't loud. It's slow. It's in the small choices. Waking up early just because you can, cooking a meal you love, laughing with friends again, realizing that your peace no longer depends on someone else. That's the part that saved me. Sometimes when I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, I think back to that younger version of me, the girl who thought love meant sacrificing everything. I wish I could tell her what I know now. I'd tell her that love shouldn't make you feel small, that the right person will never make you compete for space in their life. I'd tell her that real love grows in freedom, not control. I think about Evelyn too, more often than I'd like to admit. I wonder if she ever realized how much her interference cost her son. Maybe in her mind, she was protecting him. Maybe she thought no one could ever love him the way she did. But love isn't about ownership. It's about letting people grow, even if it means growing away from you. That's something she never understood. And Daniel paid the price for it. But in a strange way, she also taught me something.
She showed me what happens when love turns into control and how important it is to break that cycle. I promised myself that if I ever have children, I'll love them enough to let them go when it's time. I'll never be the kind of mother-in-law who sees love as a competition, because love should multiply, not divide. A couple years later, Tyler proposed. It wasn't a big fancy thing, just the two of us at the lake watching the sunset. He said, "You make peace look beautiful." I laughed, tears in my eyes, and said yes. It wasn't about replacing the past. It was about starting something new, something healthy. The kind of love that doesn't need to be proven or protected, just shared. On our wedding day, I stood there looking at him, thinking how different this felt. There was no fear, no tension, no ghosts from the past whispering in my ear. Just calm, just love. My mom was there, smiling through happy tears, and for a moment I thought about Evelyn again. I wish she could have seen that love doesn't have to hurt to be real, that sometimes the best way to hold on to someone is to let them stand on their own. As the years went on, I stopped thinking about Daniel as the man who broke my heart. I started seeing him as a lesson, a chapter that taught me what I deserved. Sometimes the people we love are just mirrors reflecting the parts of us that still need healing. And when we outgrow that pain, the mirror fades. I didn't need to hate him to move on. I just needed to forgive both of us for not knowing better. Now, every once in a while, I still get messages from women who hear my story. They say, "I'm going through the same thing. I feel like I'm losing myself to someone else's family." And I tell them the same thing every time, that you can love someone deeply and still choose yourself. That walking away isn't failure, it's survival. I tell them about the nights I cried alone in a house that didn't feel like mine, about the mornings I woke up dreading the sound of my phone because I knew it'd be another message from someone trying to control my life. And I tell them how it felt to finally breathe again when I let go, to wake up one day and realize that my happiness didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. That's the moment you start living again. I don't know where Daniel is now. Maybe he found someone new. Maybe he's still figuring himself out. Either way, I hope he's okay. I hope he learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. And I hope he remembers me not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the part of his life we shared and the lessons it brought. As for me, I'm happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from big moments, but the quiet kind. The peace that comes from knowing you survived something that once broke you. The kind that lets you sit in silence and smile because you finally feel free. And maybe that's what life is really about. Not avoiding the people who hurt us, but learning from them. Not holding on to what was, but embracing what is. Every heartbreak, every loss, every mistake, they all lead us back to ourselves if we're brave enough to listen. So if you're hearing this, if you're in a place where you feel like you're losing yourself just to keep someone else happy, please listen to me. Don't shrink for anyone. Don't twist yourself to fit into someone else's idea of love, because the right person will never ask you to do that. And if you have to walk away, walk proud. Walk free. You'll find yourself again. I promise. I did. And that's the real ending of my story. Not the heartbreak, not the divorce, not even the regret. The real ending is peace. The kind you build for yourself after the storm is over. Because sometimes the person you become after losing everything is stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than the person you were before it all began.